Welcome to Car and Driver. Now, even if you don't know anything about this, the Tesla Cybertruck, you've probably already made your mind up just by looking at it. The design is that polarizing. And if you do know something about it, it's probably reaffirming some belief you already have about Tesla, let's say the app formerly known as Twitter, and to an extent, maybe the world at large. But here at Car and Driver, we like to do things a bit differently. We like to test and evaluate and then derive our opinion from that experience. And that's exactly what we've been doing for the past week with this truck. We've driven it all over the place, from the city to the beach to the canyons. We talked to random people to get their opinions of it. We did our instrumented testing. We measured how quickly it can accelerate, how short it can stop, what its road holding is. We measured how quickly it can charge. We did our loop to see how far it can go on a single charge. We took it to a metal recycling yard to see what the composition of each body panel was. We pulled the wheels off and took our in-house suspension engineer and had him explain what's going on underneath this vehicle. You can check an accompanying video for that aspect of it. We talked to the engineers at length for hours to get their opinions and goals and understand what they were trying to do, and they were refreshingly open about that whole process. I mean, we've done everything except for shoot it, but we'll talk about that too. This particular Cybertruck is the $100,000 Cyberbeast with the $20,000 Foundation Series option. It has 3 propulsion motors and 834 horsepower. And yes, it's quick. We recorded 60 miles an hour in 2.6 seconds. The quarter mile, 11 flat, making this the quickest truck we've ever tested.
Here we go.
Let's just get this out of the way at the start. This is a wild and hugely impressive piece of engineering. In fact, the sheer amount of innovation in this thing is stuff that you don't typically see in one vehicle from a regular manufacturer. In fact, there's so much to talk about that we couldn't really fit it all in this video, so please check out the accompanying articles for more of those technical details. So we have to, of course, talk about the exterior first, because that's the thing on everybody's mind when they first see this truck. Yeah, it's out there and it's spacey. Even the proportions are pretty different. In terms of length, this falls in between the Rivian R1T, which is shorter, and the F-150 Lightning, which is longer, both of course being electric pickup trucks. This though is wider than both of those trucks and lower in height. So the proportions are just as different as the design, maybe a bit less, but you get what I'm saying. The overall appearance makes driving the Cybertruck like hanging out with a celebrity, literally stopping traffic and gathering small crowds when parked. Some people wondered if it was a concept car or a movie prop. One woman straight up asked if it was real. Some people loved it, others said it was too much. One woman, a reservation holder, second-guessed her deposit after seeing it up close. Now, the exterior, most of it is stainless steel, just like the fridge you might have at home. And with that comes a total rethink of everything you know about vehicle maintenance. You don't use quick detailer because there's no paint or clear coat. You use glass cleaner. If you want to do the equivalent of a clay bar, you get a product like Barkeeper's Friend. Now, the downside is it's a fingerprint magnet. It's going to show a lot of grime really quickly, but the upside is it's really strong. Like, watch this. You know, a good mule kick is only going to hurt my foot. It's not going to do anything to this exterior. And that means you don't have to worry about things like dents in parking lot or debris hurting the front end, because this stuff is just so strong. It's so strong, in fact, that when we talk about side impact crash safety, most cars, it's a thin skin over a void in here, and there's usually a beam that runs diagonally through that void to help reduce like the impingement during a side impact. This surface is so strong that Tesla didn't actually need that beam across here, because this does all the work for you. It's that strong. Tesla describes the exterior as an exoskeleton, but it's more accurate to think of the truck as a unibody with a stressed steel exterior. There's an aluminum structure underneath that the steel is welded to. That steel is a proprietary blend that Tesla calls HFS, for hard freaking steel. That's cute, but we wondered what it was actually made of, so we visited a metal recycling yard.
So the closest match that it got
301?
was a 301.
Yeah. Using an XRF spectrometer, the owner of C&M Metals told us the steel is in the neighborhood of 301 or 303 stainless, but the composition changes depending on the body panel. For example, there's copper present in the front bumper that isn't in the doors, indicating that each panel has properties specific for its place on the truck.
Yeah, if I were to buy this as scrap, it would be about like 50 cents a pound.
How much?
50 cents a pound? Scrap.
Now, speaking of strength, Tesla specifically asked us not to shoot this thing, which, as you can imagine, is not an unusual request when you're borrowing a car. What is unusual is any automaker claiming that any part of their vehicle can stop bullets. Now, to be clear, Tesla hasn't undergone any bulletproof certification process like through the NIJ, because they would have taken one look at the glass and been like, nah, man. But according to Tesla, these door skins can stop most common handgun cartridges. They won't stop anything high velocity, above supersonic, really small bullets, because those things will just punch right through. So your most common intermediate or rifle cartridges are going to sail right through these doors. So yeah, technically it's bulletproof, but I wouldn't bet my life on it. So the body's tough, yeah, but the way it looks must be terrible in terms of aerodynamics, right? Not really. Tesla says the drag coefficient on this is 0.335, which is significantly better than most internal combustion engine pickup trucks. To be clear though, it's nowhere near as good as the Rivian R1T's 0.30, but again, the Rivian doesn't look like this. Now there's a bunch of really neat details that went into getting the coefficient of drag down that low. This enormous windshield wiper, for example, is one of them, because it sits in this position when you're not using it, because in effect, it works like a strake on a diffuser. It even moves inward by a few degrees at highway speeds to improve aerodynamics and reduce wind noise. Now, when you have the windshield wiper going, of course, it rests down here so water doesn't streak up the windshield while it's raining. The other thing is the front end. This is the only curved piece of stainless steel on the truck, and the Tesla engineer said that was instrumental in helping them achieve their goals. All the real work though happened underneath this truck, which if you look is smooth and really sculpted. Now, of course, there's a battery there, but this is where the engineers said the bulk of their work was done to hit their aerodynamic targets. It's also likely the reason why this truck doesn't have a spare tire like most trucks do underneath the bed. And this one doesn't have one at all, because the engineer said if there was one there, it's very likely, they guessed, that the coefficient of drag would be similar to those internal combustion pickup trucks I already mentioned. To be fair, Tesla sells a spare tire and accessory kit, but it takes up a good chunk of the bed and costs $1,250. It's also why you have a powered tonneau that you want to keep closed to maximize range. Speaking of, the Cybertruck's gross vehicle weight rating means it's classified by the Fed as a heavy-duty truck, so it's exempt from having to report fuel economy and range figures. But Tesla tells us that the Beast's 301-mile range estimate comes from using EPA's light-duty testing methodology. The EPA test incorporates city driving, where EVs do great, but getting stranded in Nowheresville on the freeway is worse than running out of juice in the city, where charging stations are more prevalent. So for all EVs, we at Car and Driver perform a real-world 75-mile-an-hour range test. The Cyberbeast result was 250 miles, which is right in line with the performance of other electric trucks. The Lightning did 230 miles, but the quad-motor R1T on comparable all-terrain tires did 250 miles. But while the Cybertruck was 51 miles short of its estimate, that margin was smaller than the Ford's 70-mile delta, as well as the 94-mile difference we saw on the Rivian on the more comparable all-terrain tires. Out of curiosity, we also measured the aerodynamic consequences of driving at freeway speeds with the tonneau cover open, 10%. As for those wheel covers, you can safely leave them off. Not only do they lack holes for accessing the air valves, but they also only improve consumption by 1.7%. One of the other innovations isn't four-wheel steering. This has that, of course it does. But it's the fact that the steering wheel is not connected to the wheels mechanically. This is a true steer-by-wire system. Now, before we go any further, if that gives you any pause, just realize any plane that you've been on, and maybe the past decade has largely worked the same way. And the way it works is there are 2 electric motors on the front steering rack that share responsibilities. So in the event if one were to fail, you still have enough power left in the remaining motor to help you pull over to the side of the road. On top of that, there's a bunch of redundancies built into the system, too many to cover right now, of course, and they are aimed to give you lots of time to react should anything begin to stand out or not work the way it should. Speaking of working the way it should, let's hop in and I'll show you some wild things that it lets you do. So because it's all software based, Tesla can make the steering behave however they want. So at low speeds, you have a really quick steering ratio. We're talking less than a turn lock to lock. So you never have to go hand over hand in a parking lot. And you can go as fast as you want. You're not gonna hurt it. You're just gonna rock the thing back and forth and maybe tire yourself out. At speeds, the ratio slows down accordingly, and we'll talk more about the way it feels once we actually start driving this thing. Those are 20-inch wheels with 35-inch tires that weigh nearly 90 pounds each. What enables steer-by-wire is Tesla's upgrade of the electrical architecture from 12 to 48 volts. While you won't notice the direct effects of this change, there are myriad downstream benefits. For example, in combination with a new style of onboard vehicle communication system, there are significantly fewer wires needed in the electrical system in whole. That's all a bit heady, but consider this. On our scales, this 3-motor EV pickup weighed 6,901 pounds. And that falls exactly between the last 2-motor Rivian R1T and 2-motor Ford F-150 Lightning we tested. Ready? Jiminy Christmas. This is ridiculous. All right, so driving the Cybertruck is many things. In beast mode like we are right now, it's ridiculous because it's so powerful, and when you nail the accelerator, it gives you what feels like all of it. You can hear the wheels chirping as you lay into the accelerator. It's nuts. But backing away from that excitement, at first, this experience is really weird. You have a truck that is pretty heavy, not relative to other EV pickup trucks, of course, but to cars in general. And it's super wide, right? But you have a steering wheel that seems 75%, maybe 60% of the size it should be. And the steering ratio remains very quick, so you don't have to do a lot of input on the wheel itself. That makes this thing feel more nimble than it should be. And then you actually get into some corners, which it's obviously a pickup truck. It's not built for corners, of course. But you can see how you could run into trouble quickly. Then you have the windshield, which ends like what seems like in another zip code over there. There's enough space in front of me that I could probably lay 2 people lengthwise across the width of this truck. And that's strange. And then you have the 4-wheel steering to consider, which makes it feel like the car's steering behind you. So overall, the experience feels strange at first. Yeah, you get used to it, as you can do with a lot of things. I kept thinking when I got in this is what driving an armored personnel carrier in a video game or a sci-fi movie might feel like. Like, I feel like I'm driving something that military, the police would use in Demolition Man or Halo or something. That's where my mind goes immediately. Aside from all that though, the drivability is quite nice. The ride quality is pretty good for a truck that's on 20-inch wheels and 35-inch tires inflated to 50 PSI. It's pretty impressive, and is the road noise. You don't hear a lot of undesirable noises from outside, like other cars or wind or whatnot. What you do hear are the sounds of this truck. It's hard to hide the sound of those all-terrain tires. It's hard to hide the sound of the propulsion motors, and even when you're stopped and you crank the steering, you can really hear those motors drive the steering. Aside from that though, it feels pretty nice considering it's a big, wide, heavy, powerful EV pickup. We do have to talk about outward visibility, of course, and if you're sensitive to outward visibility, you may not be a fan of this truck. These massive A-pillars, you know, there's little portholes in the sides which help, but on this 2-lane road, and yes, I know it's a pickup truck, not made for 2-lane roads, blah, 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 this almost completely blocks the oncoming traffic in most corners. I just can't tell what's there. And because the hood, I guess we don't have so much of a hood, that tapers away really nicely, but this shelf that extends at the base of the windshield can make it hard to figure out what's happening in that space in front of the vehicle. So thankfully there's a bunch of cameras outside of this car that make it, I guess, somewhat more easier to help navigate, and there's a variety of, whoa, I can't help myself. So there's a variety of cameras that make it possible to see what's going on outside of the vehicle, and that helps with navigating. But if you're, again, sensitive to visibility, this could be a challenge. Also, this rearview mirror is like a joke. It seems like it's 3 sizes or 4 sizes too small. Of course, you can't use it when the tonneau cover is up, or closed, I should say, because it's totally blocking the view. But even when it's not there, it's still very, very small. They solved that in their mind by putting a camera display, and that's how you see what's going on behind you in the Cybertruck. I'm impressed that this works as well as it does. It's not just hobbled together, it's legit. It's legit. Overall, I'm impressed by how well this thing drives, considering the things working against it from a physics standpoint and everything else. This works. We're driving in the beast mode right now, but if I dial it down to comfort, the ride gets nice and soft and compliant. The accelerator gets less manic, which can be nice. And yeah, this thing actually becomes pretty smooth to cruise in. It's almost at odds with how it looks because it drives way more calmly. Of course, you can get those all-terrain tires to squeal pretty easily. They're well out of the place they're supposed to be operating, doing what I'm doing right now. If you've been inside of a Tesla before, you know what the experience is like. If you haven't, welcome. It's pretty minimalist in here, both in terms of design and stuff to do outside of this screen. Storage is pretty good in this Cybertruck. You got a big bin here underneath this armrest, 2 cup holders. Your phone goes here, and these are both wireless chargers. That's nice. Floor is flat, so you can put stuff down here, which is pretty cool as well, and the door pockets are pretty generous. Now, all your attention goes to this screen, and for good reason. Everything is done through this screen, and there's so much stuff to do in this screen, it's kind of exhausting to list it all out. You can watch streaming video like YouTube, Netflix. You can play games. They've emulated Stardew Valley and like Cuphead, which is pretty crazy. You can browse the internet. You can do karaoke. There's like gags in here, which are really fun too, like an electronic whoopee cushion that always gives me a good laugh. The amount of controls that you get through this is pretty crazy, and you can even search for them here using that, which is great as well. What's nice is that with regard to like responsiveness and fluidity, this remains best in segment, best in class, best of all cars, let's say, with how quickly it reacts and how fluid it is, because every input happens immediately. And that's nice because you have to do everything through this screen. The downside is, if you like Apple CarPlay, if you like Android Auto, sorry, you don't get to use those, but this is so nice that you're probably okay with it. Other Tesla frustrations: modern Teslas have the turn signals on the steering wheel as these 2 buttons. That's not great. Ferrari's done it too. Not great on their products either. To put it in driver reverse, you have to do this, which is not fun when you're trying to do a quick 3-point turn. There's buttons up here that you can use as well, but nothing really beats a column-mounted shifter. But anyway, that's the Cybertruck interior. Backseat passengers, well, they're going to have a lot of legroom, and headroom's fine provided that you're less than 6 feet tall. If you're 6'4", like Alex holding the camera here, your head's going to be in the glass, and that's unpleasant. You do have an armrest that folds down, which is nice. There's also a display down here that gives you access to additional entertainment features. You can watch Netflix, YouTube, Twitch, and Hulu on here. You can also control climate. You get seat heating on the outboard seats here. So all in all, comfortable, provided you're not too tall. Guys, it's bedtime. So let's start by talking about the tonneau cover while that opens. Yes, it's power operated. Yes, it can withstand 300 pounds. So if you weigh less than that, yeah, you can stand on it. Good times. Now, in terms of size, the overall length of this bed is about the same as what you would get out of a Silverado with a short bed. Height, it's going to vary depending on whether you're talking about the front or the rear, but we'll get to that. Now, in terms of width, this has more than you would get in most pickup trucks if you're comparing them between wheelhouses. This doesn't have the wheelhouses that most other pickup trucks have, and of course, in those trucks, you have more space. If you don't include that, like on top for wider items, you can't do that here. Now, there's all kinds of attachment points, D-rings and whatnot. You've also got power outlets right here, two 120 volts and one 240 volt, which is nice, really cool, really helpful. What might be a challenge though, is when you need to access stuff over here, like you do sometimes with a pickup truck, because of how high this is, which it needs for the aerodynamic properties that it has. There's D-ring latches open there that might just be annoying if you're trying to load a motorcycle, but time will tell. One other cool feature that this has though is under bed storage for storing contraband or whatnot. There's actually a drain plug in there as well if you want to use that as an ice chest, I guess. Hey, there's a loose bolt too. That's cool. So you might be wondering at this point, why does it have to look like that? I've been wondering that for a long time, personally. Beyond the love it or hate it aspect, the design is the source of all the flaws you notice while driving and using it. Not to mention the roadblock requiring many of the innovations Tesla engineers had to find in development. But you have to keep in mind, Tesla didn't design this to win the hearts and minds of everybody. You can't with a design like that. If they wanted more people to love it, it would look way softer and more generic. No, it's designed like this intentionally. They wanted to prove a point. It's a rolling showcase of everything Tesla's capable of accomplishing. And I think it does a better job of that than perhaps maybe the Hummer EV does for GM. Now, broadly, this is a comfortable, quiet, powerful, and usable pickup truck in the sense that most of these trucks just get used for commuting and hauling the family around. This would do that exceptionally well. It's full of hugely clever and original engineering too, even if most of it is directed towards solving those problems created by the design. Much of it is stuff you don't notice daily. And when's the last time you heard about someone wanting a car for its low voltage electrical architecture, revolutionary as it may be? Still, if any other automaker had just one of these features with a new vehicle, there'd be a whole news cycle about it. Tesla's done all this on a new platform while entering a segment that it's never done before. And that kind of confidence and execution is just really cool to see and something that we should expect more of from American pickup trucks.